Hi guys, now thanks so much for joining me. Now in this session we're going to focus on how to really get your answers off and really make sure you hit the ground running when it comes to those difficult written answers. Now you want to make sure that you don't end up repeating the question back to the examiner and you get straight into answering your question. Ultimately, every sentence you write, you should be looking to get 1 mark for. So let's take a look at this. Now we're going to look at a variety of command terms. That is the question terms that you will face in your Unit 3 paper here. And I just want you to understand that there is a lot of similarity in the way in which you can really get the ball rolling. So let's take a look. Firstly, with this question, we can see that we've got a discuss-based question. This is, of course, looking at section A first. Okay, I'm looking at this paper chronologically here. So we're going to go through section A and then section B. So discuss the benefits consumers of using this payment method. Now, of course, where you are given a direct term like this contactless payment there, you may well want to actually start off with the definition, and that's a nice easy place to go. So certainly you can put down contactless payments refers to, and just make that really crystal clear to the examiner that your knowledge, your understanding is really fine there. Now, an alternative approach might be that you actually decide to look at the advantages of contactless payments as a method of payment in this type of question. So you get started by saying on one hand what they are firstly, and then what the advantages of contactless payments would actually be, and then on the other hand what the disadvantages are, okay, including like £30 limit per transaction and so on. Right, so alternatively, to really really make sure that you are gaining application marks, and I'd suggest you try and use this little phrase anyway, because it really does help you to ensure that you use the case study material. So we've got this short little introductory point before the question here, and what you would then be able to do is say the question or the case study highlights that, and that is an excellent way of ensuring that you are making reference and you are using the actual context you are being provided with. Now, the alternative method to the on the one hand, on the other hand, is that you go for firstly the advantages, secondly the disadvantages, and you look at those direct areas. So let's move it on. Now let's have a look at an assess-based question. So we've got this guy who's 38 years old, he's been made redundant, he's got a redundancy payment. Should he save or invest? What's he thinking about? Well, he's either thinking about savings account or investing in shares. Now, when it comes to answering this type of assess-based question, you want to think of a PPJ-based response really. That is paragraph 1, paragraph 2, and providing a judgment. Okay, so that judgment should include justification. And remember, you've got to make sure that this is all in context here. So assess which of these two options is more suitable for knit-in. So obviously, as we've just done in the previous answer, you can start off with the definition, what a savings account is, what shares are, okay. Now, you'd firstly start by looking perhaps at a savings account, and then you'd then focus on one hand, the advantages of this are, and then when you're looking at shares, you'd then go on the other hand. We've got shares are, and so on, okay? Now remember what we said about making sure that you use context in your answers. So once again, we can use that very similar phrase here. The case study highlights that. That's going to help you to just utilize basic things like the numbers that are actually used in the case study, so you can really get that point across to the examiner that you're aware of the context and you're using that context in your answer. Now, alternatively, you could start off by simply going, firstly, savings accounts are, and then explaining what savings accounts actually are. And then secondly, once you've finished your analysis of savings accounts, you then look at shares with your alternative option. And then you reach an overall judgment, of course. Okay, so let's now move it on again. The evaluate question, the longest questions on the paper. You've got 2 of these, of course, representing 24 marks, your final grade. Well, what's a good way to get going with this? Okay, so we can see that we've got financial products. Now, the financial products that might be highlighted within this sort of question, it could be current accounts, it could be ISAs, it could be a huge variety of different types of products, or even insurance services that are provided. So again, try and start with the definition. It gets the ball rolling. It's almost like putting the car in first gear. It is basically level 1 base knowledge that you have an understanding of key terms. Okay, so give that definition, really get off to a good start, and then go into perhaps you're on the one hand, on the other hand, or the case study highlights, and then you've got firstly, secondly, and so on. So those approaches you can see are remarkably consistent throughout section A. So let's now move on to section B. So here we go with discuss how useful a cash flow forecast can be to a small business here. Now, we've got various reference cash flow forecast in the question intro there, and so again, just start with the definition, just get the ball rolling. Okay, then go into on one hand, on the other hand. Okay, looking at firstly the advantages, secondly the disadvantages, and make sure that you use the context. How can we ensure we use the context? Well, the question highlights, or the case study highlights, or Arabella is experiencing, and so on. Okay, and then the alternative approach is right. So cash flow forecast. Let's have a look at the advantages first up, and then let's move on to those disadvantages. Okay, so another assess-based question. Now, of course, you just get one business-based case study, so it means that you gain quite a nice understanding of that business, how it's been performing in recent times, the financial information, and where that business owner wants to take it. So try to make sure that you refer back to all of that context in your answers. So once again, with this sort of question here, we can say, right, assess the potential impact that this new contract could have on a small business such as Bella's Beanbags. Right, so this is slightly more difficult to get going on, perhaps, this question, because there isn't a definitive term highlighted in the question. However, when you actually go through this case study information, we can see that we've got that key term there, credit terms, and so you can get started by defining that. And then focus in on what the case study is telling you. Use these figures. These figures are really nice and straightforward to actually utilize in your answers. And once again, you can then focus on what the benefits of this scenario might be, but what the downsides are really likely to be. It looks like big cash flow problems, if they're insisting on 60 days credit terms, but Arabella's paying her suppliers within 7 days. That doesn't make pretty for your cash flow. So yeah, as we've seen previously, alternatively, you could simply say, right, well, the advantage of taking on this contract is, and so on. Okay, so the final one we're going to look at in this little session is another evaluate question. So evaluate using the ratios given the performance of the business compared to the performance of her competitor firm. Right, well, you may want to pause the video now, have a go at actually putting down how you would go about responding to this. Well, what's a good way to go? Well, it could be, of course, you'll be provided with case study context here. You'll get various financial information, and you can certainly start off by saying, firstly, we can see that, okay, or the case study shows that, and so on one hand, on the other hand, and in comparison with the competitor. So these phrases are very, very useful to use throughout your exam. Now this one is slightly different because here we've got a direct comparison that is being asked for, but that makes for a nice useful term by actually saying, right, well, when we compare this, okay, and look at one to the other, we can see this. Okay, guys, I hope that's been helpful, just in terms of making sure that you really focus your responses to write direct sentences, which really help to gain you a mark with every every sentence. Okay, do watch this video back and test yourself on how you get started. Make sure you've learnt those key openers. Call them pick-up lines for business unit 3 finance. How about that? Right, see you next time.